Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see here on our channel. It's in the description below, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. New for 2020, this is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual 41mm. Reference 124300, now 41mm in the Oyster case, 11.7mm thick, 47.4mm lug-to-lug tip, 51.3mm end-link tip to end-link tip with a 21mm spacing between the lugs. We'll throw it on my 16cm circumference wrist, and I can tell you this watch wears a lot like the previous generation 40mm Submariner on a bracelet. So if you remember the fit of that, that's really how this feels. Now pull the sleeve back, you can see the cuff shot easily sliding underneath a dress cuff of any kind. The over-the-top shot may close the clasp and better fit the watch to my wrist. You can see I've got some clearance on both sides. And then right here you have the down the barrel shot. I'd say you're good if your wrist is 14 centimeters circumference or larger. If your wrist is smaller than that, you're going to want to look at the smaller Oyster Perpetual options. Of course, the timepiece is nicely made, but upgraded in some regard. You can see, as you'd expect in a model called Oyster Perpetual, there is an Oyster bracelet. I should mention a little bit about the Oyster Perpetual model. It resulted from the union of the Oyster water-resistant case and the Perpetual rotor winding system back in 1933, and the addition of the caseback thickness for the winding rotor led to the nickname bubbleback. So the Oyster Perpetual you see here is the direct descendant of the bubbleback, the first sports watch and the first Rolex sports watch. So this is canonical, this is core collection. True, the Sub, the GMT, and the Daytona get most of the glory, but all of them call this their direct ancestor. This was the first. This, if only one Rolex were to be saved for posterity, should probably be that watch. Now, taking a quick look at the bracelet, you can see polished outer faces, satin tops, removable links fixed by screws. The underside is actually nicely gapped, and this is to avoid pinching skin, pulling hair, or trapping wrist heat. Rolex has been building bracelets for a while. You can see there is a beacon to hook internally, so this is a vertical lock system with the embossed crown, polished on its flanks. There's a change inside as we now have the 5mm Easylink quick adjustment system. 5mm in and out. It's the equivalent of adding one removable link or removing that one link. You'll also note that there are divots and little tracks drilled, 3 of them inside the clasp, so you can use your strap tool to re-anchor the bracelet in or out within the clasp. So 3 different ways to adjust the size. The case is fluid and fine with tapered lugs, a lovely rounded case flank. It's anything but the super case we've come to know on some of the newer Rolex sports watches. There's a grace of a bygone era here, and it arguably has more in common with the Daytonas, the Date-8s, and the Date-Justs than it does with some of the more aggressive sporting references. I also like the use of the domed bezel, which is a lovely look back, as most of the bubble backs did in fact have the domed bezel. It's distinct, in my opinion, more beautiful than the sharp conical bezels used on most of the steel Date-Justs. Screw down crown, 100-meter water resistance. The dial, big, breathing, nicely spaced out, plenty of real estate, and uncrowded. I like the fact that in the 41, it can really sprawl. Blue sunburst, explosive metallic action, white gold hands, Rolex crown, and indices to resist tarnish and oxidation over time. Plenty of lume. You can see since 2018, Rolex has been spreading the Rolex crown signature across the base of its dials between Swiss and made, always staying one step ahead of the counterfeiters. You can see that there's actually a crease down the center of the minute and hour hands, and this allows them to contrast better against the dial base, which is fairly dark. Now, inside the case, you have a solid case back, Oyster style. There's a Rolex Caliber 3230, which is their new generation automatic 70-hour power reserve, bidirectional automatic winding, now using a rotor bearing instead of the previous jeweled staff. It makes the winding system more shock tolerant. It beats sway at 8 beats per second. There's a hacking or stop seconds function. It is a COSC certified Swiss chronometer. It has a full balance bridge and a free sprung balance, the 2 features making the watch very shock tolerant. I would also say that there's an overcoil hairspring made by hand with a brigade profile that allows the watch to breathe concentrically, the hairspring to breathe concentrically and keep excellent time, and even isochronous time in every position. That is the feature of the overcoil and helps the watch earn that COSC certificate, but also, once fully cased up, the certified movement is adjusted at Rolex to accuracy standards no worse than -2 + 2 seconds a day, which is the substantial basis for the superlative chronometer nomenclature on the dial. Now, the hairspring is also a blue oxidized proprietary niobium zirconium alloy that's highly anti-magnetic. Rolex calls it Parachrom Blue. And for this new generation of movements, Inca Block and KIF are finally retired. The long-term use of KIF at Rolex ends with this generation of Caliber, which uses Rolex's Paraflex in-house shock protection system. And of course, Rolex makes the case, the bracelet, the dial, the hands, the indices, the movement, everything. And ultimately, Rolex makes the alloy, 904L steel, which is highly anti-corrosive, and Rolex boasts that unlike conventional 316, this steel is so resistant that if you put it in salt water, you need not rinse it off. There is no danger of subsequent corrosion. If you love this watch, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com. The Oyster Perpetual Blue Dial by night, Rolex's Liga-etched chronergy escapement in this watch, effectively Rolex's answer to the Omega Coaxial.